How would you explain the tax benefits of real estate? And we touched on it earlier with depreciation, but maybe we can go into a little bit more detail.
Yeah, let's do an example. Let's say I buy a $1 million self-storage facility. There's this part of the tax code called bonus depreciation, meaning not every bit of that self-storage facility is depreciated over a 29-year time. Usually the $1 million is divided by 29 because it's one that percentage every year for 29 years, a very small deduction every year. But there's a new part of the tax code where you can write off more of that expense early on in the life cycle, because the roof is not a 30-year time cycle. The doors, the landscaping, that can all be depreciated quicker. So you group all the stuff that's under 15 years, and bonus depreciation, a part of the tax code, allows you to write it off all in the very first year. And sometimes that's 15, 20, 25% of the overall purchase price of the asset. So if we buy a $1 million self-storage facility, we can write off in the very first. Well, we only need to put $250,000 down, right? The bank is going to finance 75%. So $750,000 of that's coming from the bank. $250,000 of that is coming from me. And now the very first year, I can write off with bonus depreciation $250,000 of that purchase against my income. But my income is nowhere near $250,000 on this self-storage facility the very first year. I'm only going to make 30 or 40 grand on it. So you have a big excess there. You have a big tax write-off above and beyond what your income is on that property the year that you put it in service. So that $250,000 tax write-off, it writes off about $50,000 of income from this self-storage facility, but the other $200,000 I can take and write off against the rest of my portfolio, all of my other income, and virtually, if I buy a couple facilities every single year with bonus depreciation, you can pay very little taxes. And that is exactly how who paid $750 in taxes.
That's crazy. So depreciation, bonus depreciation. Do you know if you can apply this in other asset classes, or is it really real estate specific?
It's just real estate.
With my parents specifically, if you're still lucky to have your parents around, whether you live in 5 minutes from them or not, I speak to my parents almost every day. I try to call them. We jump on a video call. They've got the portal set up in their room, so it feels like we're there, which is incredible. I almost feel like we speak, and they're probably listening to this, we might speak more now than even when I lived in the house, because when you live in the house, you take it for granted. You might have dinner with them, but you're busy with your own life. You're going to sleep. You're rushing around. Whereas now a little bit of distance, you appreciate a little bit more almost. But one thing I realized recently, and it's something I've been trying to shake up with myself with conversations, there's a lot of people who talk about asking below the surface questions, and I think that's great, and moving beyond kind of small talk. But sometimes it's kind of awkward, forced questions that are way out there, and they're not really, you haven't warmed them up, to have that deep connection.
I think the way to do it is to be vulnerable yourself. That's the way to do it.
Completely. But one thing I'll share with what I did with my parents recently, which was really fun. I was on, Zoom or Facebook Portal in this case, and I just started asking them about their childhood, where they grew up. So they're from Pakistan originally, and I literally opened up Google Maps, and we zoomed into all these different places, like my dad's village, and then where he went to school.
Oh, and they started telling stories.
Exactly. And I didn't even plan this. And I was just like, wow.
Did you record it? Hopefully you were recording it.
Do you know what? That one we didn't record because it was on Facebook Portal. But I've been thinking about, I don't know if you saw recently on Twitter that my dad sends these amazing notes, and my mum as well nowadays. After this conversation, after watching it, they tell me what they liked, the concepts they liked, and ideas they remember, and they just share that with me. And I shared that on Twitter recently, and it went semi-viral at my scale anyway. It was about Andrew Wilkinson's episode, and because it was this pure gesture of love to a son, of good job, I'm proud of you. Another one said something along the lines of, it was all about sleep, that episode, and he was like, yeah, this is great, I'm cutting my caffeine after lunch. By the way, you look tired, you need to get some rest. Fatherly advice. So it was stuff like that, and I asked my dad if I could share it, and I did, and people were like, this is the most incredible thing. But I bring that up to say the conversations we had that day were so like deep, because they're like, my dad's like, oh, I used to take a bike from there and go 45 minutes to this other village, and then when I was 16 I moved to this other place, and then it just visualizes that conversation. So if you listen to this, you want to connect with your parents maybe in person, like that Google Maps thing was really cool, because you can even do the satellite view and they can share like some stories they don't usually.
That is awesome. I'm going to go, when I see my grandfather next, I'm going to pull up Google Maps on an iPad or computer, and I'm going to zoom in on his house, and I want to say, where did you live before that? And let's go look at that. Yeah, that is awesome, man. That is awesome.
Yeah, man. And if you end up recording it and you ever want to share it, it might just be a personal thing. I'd say, like, I think right now people really want these sorts of things, and even just the thought, even if it's just tweeting out that you did that, I feel like a lot of people would gain from that. And like from my dad's tweet that went semi-viral, someone responded to me and said, I'm about to go and call my parents. My dad died when I was 18, but this made me smile. Like, and that's all these things I didn't expect to come out of like a silly little tweet,
The craziest one is the conservation easement. The conservation easement is the craziest thing ever. And it's very shady, and there's a lot of people that are going to go to jail because of this. But basically, imagine we're in Juniper, Florida, where all the really wealthy people live, and there's a golf course that Michael Jordan, he actually did this. He turned a swamp into a golf course. He spent enough money to turn a swamp into a golf course in Juniper, Florida. So what happened was, there's other investors that are buying now the swamp around Michael Jordan's golf course, and they are then getting the appraiser to come and say, okay, how much is Michael Jordan's golf course worth? This land is now worth the same, because really it's not. It's worthless, right? The appraisers are kind of shady. They're coming in, they're putting a high value on that property. And then what you can do in the tax code is make a conservation easement where, say I own some land, say I own some of that swamp, I'm going to give it a value and I'm going to donate it to a conservation program, or I'm going to donate it to basically the government. I'm going to make it available for everybody. It was put in place to like make parks and pristine land available to the public, but it's being taken advantage of. And that, the value of the property when you make that donation is used like you are making a donation to a charity, and it's a tax deduction. So let's say you buy this swamp for $10 million in Juniper, Florida, but the appraiser comes in and says, oh, Michael Jordan built this golf course over here. This is worth a lot more now. This is worth $200 million, this 90 acres you bought. Let's donate it all to the government and get a $200 million deduction. And they basically turn this into a syndicate, and they sell parts of it, and everybody gets a little bit of a tax deduction. It's a big old crooked scheme, and a lot of people got busted.
That's insane, man.
Entrepreneurship is, you see these people on Twitter, and I'm guilty of it, that say like, hey, you need to have money to make money. You need to own a business. You got to have leverage. You know how to get rich without getting lucky. You see all these things in mainstream media about entrepreneurship, and unfortunately, there's a lot of bad things about entrepreneurship that people don't see. I was in a very bad mental state a couple times in the storage business when my employees were driving box trucks down highways in Boston, and they went on the wrong road and on Soldier Field Drive, and they ripped the roof off of our brand new truck when we didn't have any money in the bank to pay for the fix. And same day, another guy put gasoline in a diesel fuel engine and blew a motor up on a truck that we rented, and we got a $6,000 bill. And I was in those two trucks were out broken down, full of people's stuff, and the customers were calling us, and and I had a mental breakdown on the side of the road. I was crying. I was in a shitty warehouse in Medford, Massachusetts, having a breakdown on a sidewalk, and I wanted to just call my mother and cry in her arms that day.
Dude, we've all been there, man, for sure.
There's a lot of anxiety and stress. Yeah. Like, we make it seem easy. We act tough. Us entrepreneurs, we're on the internet saying, oh, we're badasses. We know what we're doing. But in reality, there's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of insecurity. There's a lot of, hey, am I really doing this right? I don't know. Can I really be so sure of myself? Am I a scam? I don't, there's a lot of that people don't talk about. And, so a lot of times it's great to go into a company, add a ton of value, find a good boss that's going to pay you well, and kick ass that way.
Tell me about that, man. Like, how's that experience changed the way you see the world, before and after having kids? What changed in you?
Yeah. So first of all, I had a really good father. He pumped me up. He told me that he was proud of me. He tells me that he's proud of me all the time. And honestly, when my dad calls me on the phone and tells me that he's proud of me now, like that's more fun than that $2 million cash out refinance was for me. And it means more to me. Like I end up crying and my dad ends up crying. It's awesome. And I just think that we as, humans in the developed world have such an opportunity to create opportunity for our kids and be good parents. And like now never has been like, there's a lot of negativity. I shield myself from most of it. There's a lot of negativity in the media, but like now is a better time than ever. The quality of life is better than ever. The opportunity is better than ever. And if you're a good parent, you're going to raise kids that are going to build awesome families and have great relationships with you. That's one part of it. The other part of it, I've been doing a lot of talking with 50, 60-year-olds about what they're proud of and what they're doing. Every single one of them, every single person that I know that's 60 years old or older, all they care about, all they want to talk about is their kids and their grandkids. And like I can see it now that I have 2 kids. I can see it that they delight me. I want to explore with them. I want to learn with them. I want to build memories with them. And like I know that I want to have a big family so that someday I'm an old man sitting at a fire when I have a coffee in my hand and I'm seeing little grandkids running all over the place and they're saying, "Papa, look at this. Papa, look at that." Like that's my dream. That's my dream.
Love it, man. You're gonna get me teary-eyed. No, I will say that my dad, we just had my nephew now is he's like 3 or 4. I don't even know what year we're in right now, but so I have a nephew. It's the first one in our family, and my dad told me, and my mum actually, that having grandkids is even better than having kids. And I was like, oh wow, that's incredible, something to look forward to. But maybe one, because they're not like figuring out a bunch of stuff. My parents were like 19, 20 something when they had the first kid.
My dad worked a lot. A lot of people's parents work all the time. My goal through all this entrepreneurship is to really, from 35 to 45, be retired like a grandparent so I can do everything with my kids.
While you've still got the health and youth on your side too. Just to talk about that a little bit more, I also loved, you talked about the tribe makes the place. And I love this as well because, look, everyone's different. I also do value like being in a certain place that you like, whether that's the climate, the culture of the city, the energy, whatever. So I pay a premium to live in New York and I'm more than happy to do so. But you're completely right. The tribe makes the place. And one of the things our mutual friend Sean Puri said, which I loved, which was he wants to be in a place where he can be like a walking distance from like 5 people that he loves, whether that's friends or family. And I just love that so much because, when you can just get up and walk, and right now we're not really taking the train unnecessarily, right? I'm not trying to spend $50 on an Uber to Manhattan for no reason either. So being able to just walk to friends and see them makes such a huge difference to your life. So I'm curious, like, how have you kind of curated that tribe for yourself too?
It's the spontaneity that makes relationships fun. That's what that's period. Like if you're planning things 3 or 4 weeks out, with people from other cities, that's fun. Like getting on a plane and going to a golf trip, that's really fun stuff. You go back to the parent stuff, and there's 8 Huber men left in this world. There's 8 men in my lineage with the name Huber left because a lot of them had daughters and their names didn't carry on. And they were all in Athens, Georgia for a golf trip with me 2 months ago, and it was one of the best weekends of my life, getting everybody together, and they loved it. They ate it up. So that part of it is fun, like traveling to see people that you're close to. But the spontaneity of, being able to just call a buddy and say, "Hey, let's go get a beer right now," or "Hey, do you want to get in the car and drive it into Atlanta to check out this cigar bar tonight?" Or do you want to, like, "Yeah, I'm coming over. Like, I don't care what you're doing. I'm coming over to see you." Like those are the relationships that are fun, and the digital age is just crushing that stuff. When I was a kid, the kids would come over and knock on doors, and my parents would have friends just stop over. They would just stop over, and the kids would get out and they'd come in, and sometimes my parents were a little bit pissed off, but most of the time they were really happy. And I think that College was different for us than it was for my parents. My parents went to the pub at 5 o'clock because that's where everybody met. And then the rest of the day was spontaneous. Hey, do you want to go to this? Do you want to go do that? And when I was in college, people sat in their rooms and drank vodka until 11 p.m. and then met at the bars for 5 minutes. And it was ridiculous.
And they didn't probably remember half of that after that point anyway. Yeah, actually, I will say one extra point on that though is I completely agree with you, and I'm all for like being able to see people in person. Those are the best relationships. But I am conscious of some people growing up in a place where they don't necessarily have that, whether that's a bad household. Parents, both of us are lucky to have great parents who we liked being around or whatever, but there's some people who don't have that. And then secondly, there are some people who go to school. I've heard you talk about getting bullied. I've had some of that myself as well, and we can go into that in a second. And sometimes your virtual tribe or your tribe isn't what you want, and you have to go and find people and be intentional about that. And when you're like 16 or 15, you don't really have much room to do that because it's all based on proximity, where you live, the school you go to. And I will say I've seen some amazing communities, especially in the last year, where people of a similar mindset are meeting up on Zoom. I know it's not as good as real life, and it's not the spontaneity.
It's pretty darn close. This is a pretty awesome conversation right here.
Yeah, for sure. And you're able to have these conversations with people virtually. And like, I'll give an example. Jack Butcher, who's been on the show now twice, Visualize Value dude. I've never met this guy in person, but me and him text almost every other day, if not every day. And this like kind of sounds a bit weird, but like we just get on so much. And it's because we connected through this conversation first. And then, we start learning each other's like backgrounds. We realize, we're both from the UK. We like the same music as a kid and stuff like that. And there's this sort of connection that I just saw his wife post a picture of 10 years in the US with him. And I was genuinely happy for them, like I would be like one of my best friends who I've known forever. So there are those connections you can make with people.
That is such a good point. I think too many people have friends because of proximity. I mean, first of all, it's a really sad deal to not have good parents. Like if you don't have good parents, you are set up for failure in this world, unfortunately. Like the school system can only do so much, education system, it's really, really, really tough. But too many people make too many friends based on proximity. And you can have, I see my world really changing. This Twitter stuff is all coming fast for me. It's new. But I think in 5 years, my 10 best friends, 5 of them will be folks that I met on Twitter, and 5 of them will be folks that I go see once or twice a year, and we have an amazing weekend together. And I think those will be my people. Those will be the people that care about business and life and getting better and entrepreneurship. It's really hard to find 5 people that live near you that are into the same stuff you're into. I'm into very unique stuff. Obviously, You talk to me, I'm a very unique person. So finding a neighbor that cares about business like I do, that cares about getting better like I do, that, it's just different. So I wholeheartedly agree with you that, hey, make some friends in other parts of the country and reap amazing rewards from doing that.
Yeah, 100%, man. Amen to that, brother. Because I feel the same, like the way I have these conversations. Let's say me and you spoke over Twitter and said, let's meet for coffee or whatever, and you happen to be in the city or I come upstate. Like, we might have a great conversation, but there's actually something amazing about our first real interaction face to face, if you want to say that, is me being able to ask you about your childhood. And to, if I met you in person, I probably wouldn't ask half these questions, right? So there's a kind of layer that you break down. And by the time now I text you next week or we talk about whatever, there's probably going to be a different sort of early relationship that's built because of these conversations too. So that's another thing I'd say to people is sometimes you need to be proactive about going to find either those communities or people you want to build relationships with. And in full transparency, the number one reason I do this show is to do this, like to have an amazing conversation, to build up those 5-10 people that I want to spend more time with virtually or in person, because those relationships compound over time. The knowledge compounds over time as well, and the experiences and the fun times compound over time. So that's kind of the number one reason. And if I optimize for that and don't care about, did 10 people will listen to this or 1 million people, like, yeah, I want to optimize for that at some point. But really, if I do this, the output will follow for sure. So
that is an awesome way to do it. Yeah, I've had a similar rewarding experience from my podcast, and yeah, the relationship, finding a way to break these barriers down early on in a relationship with somebody pays dividends. Definitely.
100%, man. you seem like a pretty honest, open guy, and so am I. So let's talk a little bit about that, because a lot of people listening to this have a chip on their shoulder. They've gone through bad experiences, maybe trauma, depending on how bad it was. If you don't mind me asking, like, do you feel any like pain or like residue from those experiences being bullied when you were younger?
It stuck with me for a little while. Yeah, I just think that, you know, there's nothing in this world more cruel than a 4th grade to 10th grade human being. And it takes away they don't have that feeling of emotional pain that they've caused, and they also have this status game where they act like apes, and it's their job to knock others down and pull people down and get to the top. And these status games, I mean, part of it is just finding somebody weak and being mean to them to make yourself feel better, and the other part of it is finding somebody strong and trying to prove that you're stronger than them. So, you know, half of the time I was being, you know, given a rough time to the kids that were below me, and half of the time the kids that, and I was never cruel like the kids were cruel to me, but it's a crazy cycle, man. And I think a lot of it was that I moved to the school and I was good at sports, and, you know, they felt threatened and just demolished me and made my life fucking hell for 3 years probably. So yeah, that shit sticks with you.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I'll just share as well, like, I've talked about this recently on someone else's podcast that I was on, and for me it was like racism, like, and I went to a school and I'm not definitely someone who likes to even use that word when it's definitely not, but this was like blatant racism, like spitting on you, go home, like get out of our country. And I'm like, I was born 10 minutes from here, you know, stuff like that, especially after 9/11. My name's Mohammed on paper as well. So shit. That, but you know, those things happen, and, you know, maybe it made me who I am for sure. But it takes time to not have that. When you're in relationships, when you're going into the workforce, you don't even realize until much later that you're trying to prove yourself. You're trying to make up for that bad comment someone said when you were 11 years old. You know, you don't even remember it. It's deep in your psyche. And the only way to do that is, 1, to reflect and to try to think about it. 2 is, you know, maybe for someone that's going to therapist and talking it through properly. Sometimes it's just sharing, whether that's a journal yourself or talking to a friend. Now I'm definitely at peace with a lot of that stuff, but for a long time, man, that drove me in a way that was probably not natural. Because if you met me when I was 21, I was the most motivated person you ever meet in your life. I was like fired up. I was going to take over the world, and I still have an element of that in me, but I'm a little bit more like, I'm putting it in its place. I'm like, okay, a lot of that's coming from me trying to prove myself. Now I don't really feel like I'm trying to prove myself. I'm just trying to live. I'm just trying to enjoy. Yeah,
I found myself being a very cocky 18 to 24-year-old. That's for sure. Arrogant, rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Yeah. And
that's something, if you're in that age group, you might have felt something similar. And some people are 55 and never got over it and even thought about it. So I think it's important to bring up.